Hello, and welcome to the GSD Town Hall. I'm Peggy Burns, Associate Dean for Development and Alumni Engagement. We are grateful to you for taking time to check in with the GSD, and we value your interest and participation today. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the Harvard Graduate School of Design is located on the traditional and ancestral land of the Massachusetts people, the original inhabitants of what is now known as Boston and Cambridge. We pay respect to the people of the Massachusetts tribe, past, present, and future, and honor the land itself, which remains sacred to the Massachusetts people. The school also recognizes the work of the Harvard University Native American program in cultivating the relationship that led to the creation of this land acknowledgement. This is our second annual town hall for the community of GSD Alumni and Friends. Last year, we focused on department programs and updates. Today, we want to share how our students are experiencing the GSD in these unique times. We are joined by 5 fantastic students who will reflect on their time at the GSD and the thoughts they have on the future. We hope you will leave this event inspired by our students and enlightened by the many ways that you, as critical members of our GSD community, can play a valuable and ongoing role in the future of design leaders. Access to the GSD is one of Dean Whytne's top priorities. We believe that the most inclusive and diverse student body will generate the best future of design thinking across all of our departments and programs. To facilitate and grow student support, Dean Whytne will soon launch a $4 million endowed fellowship match program, which is really quite remarkable. In addition, President Bacow has committed to match $550,000 for every donation to the GSD fund, which goes directly to student support. Please consider joining us in these match opportunities, but the ways you can engage with students go well beyond financial support, and we will highlight several of those opportunities today. Our students know that they are joining a wonderful community of alumni and friends who will enhance their relationship with the GSD over a lifetime. As you maybe can see, I'm in Gund Hall, along with Dean Whytne and our panelists. It's a delight to be back on campus, and we look forward to welcoming you all back to campus next fall. Our first GSD Biennale event for alumni and friends will be on Friday, September 16th and Saturday, September 17th. So please put those dates on your calendar now, September 16th and September 17th. More information will be coming your way in the next few weeks. I have a few housekeeping announcements. This event will be recorded and the video will be shared on Thursday, March 3rd. Please note that you've been muted to improve the audio quality of the event. If you're able, turn on your video. It's so great to see your smiling faces. Closed captioned in English is available. Click the CC button to enable them. If you have questions or comments during the event, please put them in the chat. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of the event. My colleagues will add links to the chat throughout this event as they relate to the panelists' remarks. We'll start by putting a link to the GSD community value statement in the chat. With that, it gives me great pleasure to announce and introduce Sarah Whytne, who is Dean and the Josep Lluís Sert Professor of Architecture. I would say that Sarah is the best dean at Harvard. She's a renowned academic, a highly capable and competent scholar, and my boss. And now to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Peggy, and welcome everyone. We have an interesting setup here, actually. We're in Stubbins, the room that has a slightly lower ceiling than I would like. It's right next to Chow House in Gund. And so we're sitting here with our, it sort of looks like a kind of early Phil Donahue setup with my panel and a great team from both communications and events and development and alumni affairs. So this is pretty exciting on our end, and I hope you're as excited as we are. So I started out this semester or this year with, I guess it was this semester, with an email to the school, starting off with a quote from T.S. Eliot saying that last year's words belong to last year's language and next year's words await another voice. And this notion of time is something that I've brought up before with you, our alumni, but also with our community. I'm very fond of this line. It's from Eliot's poem, Little Gidding, and it recognizes last year, which obviously was a difficult year for the school, for everyone in the world. It anticipates next year, but it really focuses on the now, which is what we do here, so that we live in this kind of suspended present that always has to look back, but also anticipate the future. So COVID has caused many of us to linger wistfully upon the past, so that during COVID, we were constantly saying, oh, remember when we could do this without masks? Or to live only for the future. Think of what we can do without masks. But really, it's our immediate horizon, the now, right now, that's at once urgent and extraordinary. And I have to say, this time in Gund, even if we are still with masks, and we're hoping that will be lifted soon, it has been incredibly exciting to be back in person and to see everyone and to start having lectures in Piper and to really be together. So this has been a really remarkable time coming back. It obviously, we've had this troubled year with COVID, and we have this anticipation that things are coming back towards normal. The rates on campus have been great. The school is doing well. We're healthy. And to have the incidents happen in the Ukraine this past week has been a sort of devastating blow, I think, on top of everything else. And so I do think it's very important for the school to reflect on what's going on the other side of the world and to pay attention, which is something that we all have to be doing anyway. And I've encouraged our community to rely on our resources here at Harvard, the Ukrainian Research Institute, among others, to gain real information, to be informed, and to look at the world that's out there. So as Peggy said, student support really is my top priority. The students fuel the school. You guys can cover your ears while I'm talking about you. They're fantastic. It's just, that is really what keeps me going, is my engagement with the students. And that's true for all the faculty and staff as well. They bring in the energy, they bring in the future, they bring in really anticipating where the world is going. They're very smart, they're really engaged, and they've been just a really positive influence in the school. And so, yes, student support has been my top priority, because an education here, this amazing place, should be open to as many people as possible. I myself am someone who benefited enormously from generosity to attend several schools. And I think that is really what our world needs to do, is help fund the future of our world and help fund our young scholars. And so the announcement that will happen soon about this fundraising match, the Future Design Leaders fundraising match, is very important. So keep an eye out for that email. So right now at the GSD, I've been told I have a few minutes to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on at the GSD right now. We have about 1,000 students in 23 programs of study. It's a big place. And partly it's quite big because of the overlap as we shift our MDes program from 8 tracks to 4 domains. We actually have an overlap, and we have 12 MDes programs going on right now as a result. So that's part of the reason why we're quite big. It's also because we had a remarkable yield last year. Every student wanted to come, which is great, but it was not anticipated. So we had more students coming in. And we also had some people coming back from leaves of absence during COVID. So we have a big group in the school right now that will continue through next year and the following year. And we're trying to calibrate our numbers for admissions to help bring the numbers a little bit back down, because at a certain point, it's actually hard to find desk space. But we have a very lively school as a result right now. We have, I think it's 142 classes. I can't quite remember the number this spring. which is a remarkable number. I went through the whole list, and you can look at them on our website. And there are a couple themes that come to the fore. So one is on adaptation and mitigation across all the disciplines, trying to look at the body of material that we have in the built environment already across the world and how we can make it better, how we can make it more responsible environmentally, but also how you can improve it. And I think that's an interesting body of work, in part because I think architecture schools and design schools have long focused on tabula rasas. And frankly, most people graduate into a world where they're working on projects that already exist. And so I think it's very important to have that experience at the school. Another thread that you can see in our course offerings is that of cultural justice, of recognizing communities across the world that don't typically get the attention of design programs. And I've been very struck by that in many of the offerings. We have about 23 option studios across all the disciplines. We have only domestic travel. We don't have international travel this spring. Other news, we'll be holding an in-person commencement ceremony for the class of 2022 on May 25th and 26th. That will be my first Harvard commencement, despite being dean for 3 years, because we've had them virtually before then. We will also invite the graduates from 2020 and 2021 back for a ceremony, an in-person ceremony on May 29th. So we're essentially celebrating our alumni who graduated during COVID. Additionally, we are inaugurating the new Master in Real Estate program, which is a program that will focus on real estate development, but through the lens of climate change and climate justice and social justice. So that program will launch its first cohort of students in fall of 2023. So that will be something that you should keep your eyes open for and point potential students and applicants to. The spring events program, as usual, is full of pretty amazing events. Last night, we had Leslie Loco, who is the upcoming curator of the Venice Biennale, the next Venice Biennale, and she just launched the Africa Futures Institute in Accra. She gave the Senior Loeb Fellows Scholar Program talk last night, which was really a very exciting event. And then, and you can watch that recording online. On April 19th, we'll have a panel to launch the Harvard Design Magazine number 50, which is focused on the topic of today's global and is edited by me and Rahul Malhotra of the Urban Planning and Design Department, the chair of Urban Planning and Design. And so it's, I think, a very exciting issue, but I'm obviously a little biased. And then the inaugural Jacqueline Chirwit Urban Design Lecture will feature Pritzker Prize winner Anne Lacaton, and that'll take place on March 28th. Those are just some of the upcoming events, but we have many more. I want to give you an update from our Office of Student Affairs. You know, again, if students are our priority, that office is a huge priority in the school. And I want to introduce 2 new people whom you haven't met yet. So Janice Gilkus, am I pronouncing it right? Gilks, I'm sorry. Janice is our Associate Dean and Director of Career Services. And let me bring you to the podium just to introduce yourselves to our audience.
Thank you so much, Dean Whiting. I am delighted to be here today. My name is Janice Gilks. I'm the new Associate Dean for Student Affairs here at the GSD. This is week 6. So I just can't wait to hear directly from the students and hear about your experience. I have oversight of enrollment services, student affairs, as well as career services. So really the entire student experience from interest all the way to alum. That includes our admissions office, our registrar's office, financial aid, very focused on student wellness and well-being and supporting you during your time here, commencement, you name it, every touch point of your experience here. I now have oversight. So I cannot wait to engage with all of you and hear what we can do to make sure that your needs are met. My team, which have been here for a number of years, really does a great job in a number of different initiatives. And we just, again, look forward to really strengthening the partnerships with the students and doing all we can to ensure student success and a diverse student body. That is certainly one of my goals as I am here serving as the Associate Dean. Melissa Levine, our Director of Career Services.
Thank you. Good to be here. My name is Melissa Levine. I'm the Director of Career Services at the GSD. I've had a longer than I like to admit career in higher ed, mostly in the design, art, and entertainment spaces. So I'm super glad to be here. I've been at the GSD almost a year now. Career Services strives to help students and alumni tell their unique stories, forge a path, and help us to figure out what the future of design is and what a career path looks like for our students. This year, we've really reimagined, because of our hybrid environment, the things that we could be doing. So just a couple of highlights. This past February, 2 days ago, we held an online portfolio review week. So rather than having students sit in a room for 2 hours and have portfolio reviews, we did a Monday through Friday, 9 to 9 event. We had 137 open slots for students to have their portfolios reviewed, and we were full. Great experience. We're aiming to make our resources online so that students can access them wherever they are. And later on today, you're going to hear a little bit more about a soft rollout, about a mentor program for students to be able to connect with alumni. This is a collaboration through many offices on campus, especially the Alumni Relations Office and the Alumni Council. So we are working closely with our students and our campus partners to make things better for our students and our alumni. Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Both Janice and Melissa are fantastic additions to the GSD, and I think that they really help ensure that our students have a support network that can help them while they're here as students, but also thinking about what they want to do beyond and tying with you for advancing that. As we move on in our program, that means changing the page. So I want to say a few words about Gund Hall, that we're back in Gund Hall, which is sort of extraordinary. Gund turns 50 this year in the fall, and we're going to have an exhibition and celebration of the building. We've been doing some little nip and tuck to make sure it's a happy looking 50-year-old, and we're going to be continuing that work through this year, through this summer. So we've made some improvements that I think will be exciting for all of our alumni to come back and see. We have concrete floors now in the trays, so that brightens up the space. They're polished concrete. We've improved all the bathrooms, which is just extraordinary. We still need more bathrooms, but we're working on that. And we've tried to move as many students in Gund as we can. So there's a very exciting atmosphere here, and just improving spaces through the building. I want to turn to introducing our student panelists before we start our panel discussion with them. So it's a very interesting group from across the school, across our programs. Muha Bazila, who is in the first year of the MLA program, comes to us from Brazil. He attended the University of Brasilia previously, where he got his undergraduate degree and also an MArch. Muha is the Internal Relations Co-Chair of the African American Student Union, member of Brazil GSD, and an officer for the Harvard Brazilian Association of Students and Scholars. Areti Kotsoni, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Areti, who's in the MDes program. She hails from Greece and attended the Technical University of Crete. In addition to being an RA and a TA at the GSD, Areti co-chairs Women in Design, Mediterranean GSD, and Greece GSD. This is just, it's a cross-section of our students, but you'll see that they do so many things. Next, we have Whytne Stevens, who is in the MUP program, so Master of Urban Planning. She's from Dallas, Texas, and attended DePaul University. She's co-president of the African American Student Union and a member of the Harvard Urban Planning Organization. She's also a member of the Black in Design Mentorship Program, which is a recently launched joint venture between the GSD and Perkins and Will. It pairs GSD students with Boston-based high school students and a professional designer from the Perkins and Will team. It's a really interesting mentorship program that is in its second year, right, Whytne? Whytne was also one of the student moderators of the Q&A with Leslie Loco last night, did a fantastic job. Next, we have Isaac Pollan, who is in the MArch program, graduating, we hope, this May. Isaac grew up in Berkeley and went to Wesleyan for his undergrad. In addition to TAing across the curriculum, like many of the other panelists, Isaac has a robust work resume, including having worked for our own office, WW Architecture. So I can tell you all about Isaac on the side. And finally, we have Livesey Pack, who's also a Master of Urban Planning student like Whytne. She's here from Illinois and New York State, studied political science at Davidson College. She's involved with Women in Design and also the joint initiative community development project between the GSD and the Harvard Kennedy School. So it's a really interesting group of students, and we'll start with a set of questions and talk among ourselves for, I guess, about a half hour, is that right? And then we'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So I'm going to move over to my panel seat. Okay, I now turn into moderator. It's good to see everyone from this angle. So we have a few questions I want to throw your way just for open conversation. The first might be a very obvious one, but it's obviously one that is interesting to everyone, or at least it's interesting to me, which is, why did you apply to the GSD? Shout it out, whoever wants to go first. Areti, you grabbed your microphone, so I'm going to suggest that you go first.
Okay, great.
You have to put it close to your mouth.
Okay, so I guess you can hear me now. So I would say that I applied to the GSD because I want to explore what I can do with my architectural background and how I can add social, like work on more on social issues that I would be interested in, because in Greece, it was more centered around the form and the built environment and less in the people and the community. And I want to come here and see how I can elevate that, plus how I can work on a larger scale and add an urban design and urban planning perspective without necessarily taking a degree in these professions. So I found the MDes program, it's going to be the ideal for me. We don't have studios, but we have a lot of electives, and we are able to construct our own program of study, which I've done and I'm still doing. And yeah, mostly to explore. This is why I applied to the GSD, to explore, because I thought it's the best place I could be to do that and have the time and the resources and the people.
Excellent. Who wants to go next? Whytne.
Yes, so for me, I actually applied to graduate school twice, but not the GSD twice. But I think I realized like I really wanted to do urban planning, but more from like a design context as opposed to just focusing on policy, which I think, at least in the United States, most planning programs tend to be like heavily policy focused. And so I still wanted a space where I could think about urban planning, but from a design perspective, and also have a space where my undergraduate background, which is in art, could fit in nicely with the work that we do here at the GSD. And also just feeling like there's a lot of access to resources as well that through the GSD, or just, you know, big Harvard attached to you, and being able to access that in a way that can help forward like the kinds of work I'm interested in, or connect to different things I'm interested in researching.
Livesey.
Yeah, I was hoping to build off of Whytne's answer, which is to say that I think the GSD of all the programs that I was looking at for urban planning offered, I think, the most interdisciplinary opportunities to understand urban planning and its complexities as a profession. There's not only the diversity of design programs within the GSD, but then GSD is situated within Harvard University, and you have the opportunity to cross-pollinate with law and public policy and engineering, which all feed back into the built environment in one way or the other. And I think the one other thing I'll add is that the GSD was the one school that I saw looking at resilience, justice, and beauty as part of its overall design mission. And I think bringing all of those three elements into conversation with one another is really unique and important.
Muha.
Well, I guess I had the opportunity before applying to attend to two events here at GSD. I think the first one was Black in Design, and the other one was Secret Group, Secret Parks promoted from Professor Gareth Dorothy. And after attending these two events and realized the works and research that was presenting, I thought that this GSD would be a perfect place to continue my personal investigation that would relate race and identity with the process of design, which was my interest. And then MLA would be the program to address this in the public space, which I was looking for at the time.
That's an interesting answer. I think that these events brought you here, gave you a taste of the school. Isaac, what was your reason?
Yeah, it was a non-linear path that brought me to the school, but retrospectively, I think one that makes a lot of sense. I studied art and English undergrad, and then was fortunate enough to land at an architecture office, having very little experience, with little intention of applying to grad school. And I actually chanced upon Gund sort of on a whim. I was here in town, and I came into the building, and I realized what an amazing avid place architecture school could be, or design school could be. And it was that moment where I just walked into the building and saw the sort of like thirst for knowledge that is present here, that I knew that I felt like what I was doing in the actual world would just be so much more full and more interrogative after spending time here and sort of learning that careful, avid, curious approach to design. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, it's a similar answer in a way to Muha said, that actually experiencing being here was part of it. That's interesting in light of the fact that we're going to do open houses that are by Zoom from now on, because we want to make the open house more accessible to more people across the world, so that they don't have to come here and spend the money and try and, that we're trying to be more equitable. But we are having visit days for admits to be able to come and see. And I think also just dropping in or coming to events is always something to encourage. And I would ask our audience to help encourage people just to come by, because I think you're right that just being in this environment makes a difference. So now, once you came, right, you applied, you went through the process, you got in, fantastic, you came. What surprised you about the GSD?
Maybe I could just tack on to my previous answer, which is when I visited the school, it seemed very large. And I thought that was appealing because there was so much happening. But I think the pleasant surprise after being here, and I've now been here for 4 years almost, but even after the first year, is that it actually feels like a very tight community, and the space is not so large as it initially feels. And in fact, you see people repeatedly, and the sort of chance encounters in the hall really begin to make this place feel like a home, which it has been for me. So that was a wonderful surprise.
That's actually heartening, because that is also, so I was at a much smaller school before, and I would always tell people who are choosing between Rice and the GSD, you want to come to Rice because it's so small and intimate. And I was worried actually coming here that this place would be too big and sort of not friendly. And I think it is true that we have a lot of students, but we have a lot of programs. So the programs themselves aren't so big. There are also a lot of student organizations. You guys are part of many of them. And then there are other ways where students encounter each other. Beer and Dogs remains an incredibly important institution and did return, although it's outside in the cold, but it seems to be a pretty robust tradition that's continuing. What are some other things that surprised some of you?
For me, it was the diverse backgrounds of the students, because in my previous degree, I was used to collaborate with architects or designers. And here I realized that I'll be in class with people from policy or from, I don't know, like English or literature. So I had to use a different design slash architectural, I would say, language in order to be able to communicate with them and collaborate with them. But it surprised me in a good way, I have to say.
Yeah, that's a good skill for dealing with the world, right? They aren't all going to be trained the same way you are. So I think that's an interesting point. What about some of the others? Is there anything that, or are you totally not surprised? Is it exactly what you expected?
Mine was similar to Isaac's, was just how small it is. I've had instances where people recognize me based off emails. Like they're like, oh, I know you are. I see your emails all the time. And I think not even just like in a social context where like, you know, we're all kind of like, we know each other more than you realize. But also too, in terms of like, I think knowledge sharing is something else that surprised me, and like the breadth or like to the degree in which like, you know, people explore ideas, like even things that like may not seem like super related to design, but somehow people still find a way to make those connections, and like just being able to have those like conversations just casually with classmates every day is like really fun.
Yeah, I think that was all my surprise, plus the structure of the school. When I applied here, I knew it that would have a huge structure for the students and the whole community. But once I got here, the many opportunities that show up, like just from talk with friends and social groups and research, and sometimes it's tricky to balance like these many opportunities with the program itself, because it's a lot of things, and with in my case, I'm still learning how to navigate with this opportunity, but definitely was a good surprise to experience this in my case in the very first year.
I would just add one sort of non-answer, but there are no dogs at Beer and Dogs. There may have been dogs in the past, but I think, yeah, I would echo all of your answers. They were great answers. And then I think something that came to mind, Sarah, in your introduction, was just thinking about, I wasn't sure how it would be to navigate this kind of quasi in-person, quasi remote scenario for these past 2 semesters, and just the adaptability and the willingness of my peers to kind of to meet the moment and figure out adapting to being, okay, we're going to meet outside, or we're going to have a game night and we're going to wear masks, and that's okay because we want to be together, and figuring out how to kind of continue to build community in the present that we are in right now.
I like that. And it's true, there are no dogs, either live or hot dogs at Beer and Dogs. There is a cat that appears. I will say Remy the cat seems to be really cozying up to our school. So Remy the cat lives across Harvard, but we take great pride in the fact that Remy shows up here a lot. So I could talk about Remy for another hour, but I'm going to try and restrain myself and turn to, so we've talked a little bit about the experience of the petri dish of this Gund Hall and the whole GSD campus, because it's not just this building. And then of course, Harvard. I think, Livesey, you brought up the other schools, but let's bring it back to academics. I am your dean after all. And I'd love to hear, without sort of, kissing up to a faculty member, tell me about an academic experience, a class that's inspired you in particular ways or has turned you in a different direction, preferably in a good way. Whytne.
Yeah, I think for me, 2 classes that I found very fascinating. Last year, I took the co-design lab class with Lily Song before she left. And in that particular iteration, we were focused on the Black Belt region in the South, which is a region of where, or counties where there's like at least 40% more or more of like African Americans in the county. And looking at that in the Green New Deal and thinking about reparations, like Reconstruction, was like very fascinating to me. And it was nice to have a class that was like situated in the South, because I think the South is like a region that design schools or like the profession tends to forget, and realize that there's a very like vast amount of knowledge and vast amount of experiences that can be explored. And so being able to have that class that was situated in a region that I personally have experience with and that I'm from was nice. And I think the other class I'm taking this semester with Mark and Jalil is the Architectures of the Silk Road class. I think it's interesting, especially to explore like Sino-African relations. I think that's a topic that comes up a lot within the diaspora of like what that relationship could look like. And so just having a space to explore it like completely like unbiased and just being able to come to my own conclusion of how I feel about these relationships and what that looks like, especially through the built environment, is very nice.
Excellent. Someone else?
Yes, actually, last year I took this class called Mapping Geographic Representation and Speculation by Eric Huntley. And it was actually my first encounter with cartography, but in having a feminist approach. And it struck me. I'm actually TAing for this class this semester because I liked it so much. I wanted to repeat this. And what I learned in this class and what surprised me is that representation and what you decide to show on a map is always subjective. And at the time I was working on migration issues in the Mediterranean, working actually with migrants and their personal histories that are not visible in the standard cartographic representations. So it was very interesting for me to see how like architecture can be represented through a map, and this map can include oral histories and personal histories that we don't usually include in a standard design or architectural drawing, or it can be something very personal and very subjective. And yeah, and actually this is the direction I have right now in my studies, like using cartography as a means of representation. So
that's super interesting. I think also because it in fact it's very directly tied to cartographies and that tool and that whole realm of representation. But I assume it also affects you in thinking about all your other classes, right? Because how do you bring in these other voices, or how do you bring in these other topics? And I think that's always it opens you up, and it also challenges you to find ways to do that without spreading yourself too thin. And so setting up means of doing that. Anyone else have a class or a experience to point to?
Sure, I could share. I took an option studio last year, and Taniqua, I believe we actually have a few images from that. It's the second set of images. And the studio is called American Brick in Arcadia, and it was led by Mark Lee and Hanif Kara. And the studio was very insistent upon detail and material. It was a studio all about a brick building on the Rice University campus, which of course Sarah knows well. And
I didn't tell them to choose that site.
yeah, so all of the buildings are brick, and the project insisted on a rectangular building. The mass was almost predetermined, and all of the design happened at the sort of articulation scale and sort of thinking through the constructive logics of the building. So I just thought the sort of like the forced attention to minutia gave so much life to this project, and it was just sort of a scale that I hadn't worked at previously. And then at the same time, thinking about the scale of the campus or Houston at large. So to sort of like put all of those things in conversation with one another, but all with the material being sort of the impetus for that discussion, I thought was amazing. So, and it's changed the way I think about architecture since.
And I like that example because we have, I think, we're trying to ensure that we have classes that focus at that scale, because it's easy in today's global environment, this is one of the topics that Rahul and I have been looking at with our issue of the Design magazine, to think that everything is about things that are really big, you know, that stretch beyond the scale of a building, and how do we deal with that? But I think that being sure that we still come away with understanding that what we do is we make moves that happen with materials or with boundaries or with technologies, it's important to ensure that we get that experience as well. Anyone else, or a lecture that you've heard here, or something that has struck you? I mean, Muha sort of did this already by talking about the Sacred Grounds conference that Gareth had put together and the Black and Design conference. But you know, are there other courses or things that you've heard, even Leslie's lecture last night, that changed the way that you're thinking about being here?
Yes, I would definitely say Leslie's local last night lecture was for me incredible. To have this opportunity to hear from someone like her research, her project, and be in the same space, sharing like the atmosphere of Piper, which I think it's incredible atmosphere. Like every time that I go to any lecture there, for me is very special. For me was very important to hear something that sometimes I try to find the path that is this relation with identity and race through design, and have someone that have this experience and is already doing an amazing job in different places, and be here, like listening to her was for me like one of the highlights of my experience here at GSD so far.
Which has only been since late August, right? So
Yes.
we're working on that list of experiences. But yeah, no, I think what's interesting is you get all these different voices who come in, and I think it is worth going into Piper and being live, because you can see the events now either in Piper live or you can see them online live. But I appreciate what it's like to be in Piper, surrounded by people, and hearing things that you may have gone in and thinking, oh, I don't know anything about this person, or I know a little bit, and then be surprised by, the talk you hear that suddenly gets your mind thinking differently about your classes or about what you're doing. So I do think that that's important. Anyone else?
I'll just wrap this question up with a shout out to Malki Trishan's Reimagining Social Infrastructures and Collective Futures, which is a project-based seminar that she taught last fall, which I think was just as someone who's not a designer by background, by training, it was an opportunity to both be exposed to kind of sitting in the ambiguity of the design process. And also, I think we were encouraged to bring what experiences and talents we did have. And I think to Areti's point about, the beauty of the GSD being that you are with people of so many different backgrounds, how do we begin to pull out those backgrounds through that common language of design to build something new or present a new vision for what's to come?
Yeah, she's amazing. It's amazing to talk to her about her classes, because she knows every one of the students and is very passionate about teaching. She's terrific. So as designers who will influence the future of design and practice, I have high expectations for all of you. How can the GSD community and alumni network support you? So speaking to the many people in the squares on the Zoom screen, what are some things that you think they could do and we can do to make things even better for you?
I can go first again. I think like further highlighting work and knowledge from people or regions that are like outside the canon of what we learn in design school is very important. That's something I've been more fascinated in. And I think we live in a time now where people are also fascinated in that and like wanting to kind of broaden and add complexity to this canon, whether that's through like what we learn in school or also like what is kind of upheld in practice. I think it's important. So I guess if alumni, through like alumni connections, like bringing those voices and that knowledge and those experiences to the fore, kind of like what we've been doing through like the public lectures. But I'm sure there are many other ways that that can be done as well. I think it'd be very helpful. And I think it contributes not only to like a robust academic environment, but it also, I think, opens our minds a bit more to like what we can do like once we leave this place.
And can I pin you for a second to say a few more words also about the Perkins and Will Black in Design Mentorship Program, because you helped start that really here.
Yeah, so last year I was actually a participant, and then this year I'm doing some more back-end stuff. So basically, like it was explained earlier, we're kind of in a triad. So GSD student, Perkins Will person, and then like a Boston high school, and I think sometimes like undergraduate student. But I think it's really nice to kind of have that triad dynamic, because in some ways, especially as a GSD student, in one way, like we're mentoring somebody, but we're also like learning from someone. So I think that's a very interesting space to be in. And I think it's also nice, like all the Perkins and Will people are just like very enthused to be working with the GSD students and the Boston high school and undergraduate students. And so it's been a very nice experience to have that kind of enthusiasm. And each of the sessions are really nice because it's just nice to see like how encouraging people are, especially to like the high school students. And I think, you know, especially at that age, having someone like encouraging you and telling you, oh, like your work is great, or like you have like these interesting ideas that could like actually impact, you know, design, I think is very important to nurture. So I think that's something that's been rewarding for me, participating in the mentorship program.
It is pretty remarkable. So I met the 12 students who are doing it this year, these 12 high school students from around Boston. And I mean, it's great to meet them, to also just get the students from the GSD out of this building and out of this mindset to think about, oh, what's it like actually to be a high school student, to learn about design, and having the connection to Perkins and Will for, as you say, that sort of mentorship going up and down. I think for yourselves and for the high school students, it's been really great to watch. So I appreciate that. So other things that our screen people can maybe do to connect to the school and connect to you all, or that you would like to do to reach out to them.
Yeah, I would say something similar about creating a mentorship program, especially for the MDes students. I feel that because we have professional backgrounds before coming here, but it's confusing because for me personally, I came here with an idea, but now I want to do something else. And it would be very helpful to have someone to give me advice on that, on how to decide, for example, what internship to do in the summer, where to go next. In case I want to stay in the US, what is the best strategy in applying to a firm in order to obtain the visa later on, and things like this. And actually through Women in Design, we have a similar mentorship program where we basically couple 3 or 4 students with a GSD alumni that works in a design firm, but it's only in the US. So I was wondering if it would be possible to open this up and include other places around the world, because I know that there are so many GSD alumni living all over the world right now.
I think that's a really interesting suggestion. And I'm sure Melissa is taking notes, because as she said, they'll roll out a mentorship program that you'll hear more about soon. And I think that, you know, she is actively trying to create those links and open them up more for the school and for the students. Anyone else before we move on to the next question?
I think I would be interested in students and alumni, faculty, and the GSD administration continuing to collaborate on how to dismantle white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there has been a lot of conversation and a lot of efforts, both at the student level, at the administrative level. And I think, you know, it's one thing to be in an academic setting and kind of think through these questions, but, you know, how are alumni taking these out and you know, advancing racial justice in their work, in practice, and how do we, you know, start from what we learned in school and carry that forth into implementation and into throughout our career.
Yeah, that's very nice. Oh, Isaac, are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think seconded to all of these points. I think we could also just all work together to collectively question where design ends. And my suspicion is that it could reach farther than it does. And I think this has been related to some of my own inquiries in school, and I think many other students, but just sort of being open-minded to where we can go outside of, in my case, the traditional realm of architecture, but also urbanism, landscape. We have many things to offer. And I think if we could collectively work together to just sort of, push outwards a little bit while also being sure to listen, I think would be amazing.
That actually leads me to another question, which is sort of how much have you been able to take advantage of the rest of Harvard? And Livesey, maybe you could start off because you have been participating in this program with the Kennedy School.
Yeah, I think the community development project, as one example, has been a great way to, I think, beyond just taking classes at other schools, really beginning to build like personal relationships with other students and having an initiative that brings people together to collaborate across disciplines and begin just, is this a policy question or is this a design question? And maybe it's actually a middle ground in between. I would encourage the proliferation of programs like that across not just the Kennedy School and the GSD, but with other programs as well. And I think then we can begin to get at what Isaac was putting forth, which is how do we kind of see where the limits are and go beyond them.
Has anyone else taken classes outside the GSD?
Yeah, so I think most of my classes last semester were actually outside the GSD. A lot of them were more like requirement classes, but the one class I did take is called African Spirituality for Modern Times with Jacob Olapona in the Div School. And it was both a graduate and undergraduate class, and most of the graduate students were Div School students except me. But it was interesting because it's a subject I've always wanted to learn more about in general. And actually, through that class, like there were like connections to like African spirituality and like urban planning, like urbanism. Like I wrote like my final paper about those two topics, actually like combining them together. And so it's interesting to like learn like through my research, for example, like prayer cities in Nigeria, and like the concept of like a church or like a religious institution being able to like build a whole city like from scratch and like have their own like infrastructure and like electricity, and almost in some ways function better than maybe like the secular parts of the city was also interesting. Or looking at Ile-Ife, I believe, and some of the sacred sites in that region of Nigeria, and how in a lot of those sacred sites, because of the religious and spiritual beliefs, like a lot of those sacred sites are kind of like not even really tampered with, and people find it taboo to tamper with them, even if like the rest of the city is, growing to accommodate, migration throughout the country. So being able to make those connections between like my GSD work and something that might seem like tangential or not related was really fun.
Anyone else?
I'm not taking a class outside GSD yet, but Harvard Brazilian Association group, it's my way to connect with students outside GAN. And thinking about this association, I think it's also going back to the last questions, that as a Brazilian, considering like South America might be a great way also to connect and have those experiences from alumni in these areas and create this network of alumni in South America, in Brazil, and how can we connect with the students, current students here, but as well students or like undergrads that want to apply to a grad school here and want to create, but sometimes have like this feeling that it's Harvard maybe not possible, or maybe just by representatives, like creating this connection, like open talks, invite people to know about, maybe it would be amazing way to help build more diversity here at school, and also broaden our horizon, and again going back to Whytne answer the canon that we are considering here. in general as it's
That's very interesting also as a suggestion. And I'm curious, did the Harvard Brazilian Student Organization find you or did you find them?
I think they found me. I
So
can't remember.
you got an email one day just saying, Muha, we know you're here.
Oh,
You're Brazilian, we're Brazilian. Come join us.
No, I think everything started when we received the admission letter. We start to connect with all Brazilians that was being admitted, and we have this smaller group, which I thought that was smaller, but considering the diversity here was a decent group of 7 or 8 admitted, and 7 came. And because of this group, we start to connect with the whole Harvard group as well, because in our admission we have a huge issue with visa, because was like the first class that will return to campus, and then this help in a way to connect through Harvard, like to all the students at Harvard, even from other schools as well. In some point we had a huge connection, so just try to figure out how to get the visa to come to school.
Areti, did you have similar experiences as an international student coming here?
If you mean with the visa, yes, I did. Yeah, but I mean, this is in the past right now. In terms of classes outside of the GSD, I took a documentary filmmaking class, which was very interesting because I'm trying to explore different ways of dissemination of my research, and except from the standard like paper format. And I thought that documentary and filmmaking would be also like cartography that I mentioned before. It can be a great way to basically communicate in an easier way your research to a broader audience, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were saying that it's similar to your cartography experience and that you're getting these different means of representation that let you speak to different audiences. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Do you all have any questions for me? I'm going to let you pause on that. You can think about that while I look and see if there are questions from the audience. So, oh dear, there are 20 messages. Oops, I was doing the wrong. All right. So, okay, there are questions coming up. So I will come back to that. So you can mull over that one for a little bit. So a question from Francisca Amaker, and I apologize if I pronounce names wrong. What is the GSD's relationship to climate sustainability efforts? So I know some of you have been interested in that topic. Who wants to take a stab at that question? Isaac.
I can start. I mean, I think it's such a complicated issue that, of course, there's many different ways in which we can begin to try to untangle all the problems that we're having. But there's a lot of room at the school to pursue these issues in various forms. I know that the landscape studios have certainly been tackling this, as have the urbanism studios, but also in the architecture program. My thesis actually is related to the wildfires in California. And I've been thinking about infrastructural buildings that are sort of not firehouses, but fire-related buildings that sort of work with the ecology of California. So I think that, you know, architecture is one way in of many, but yeah, you walk around the trays and you see sort of like, you know, a sort of consistent attention to water, fire, air, the sort of elements of the world that are changing around us in many projects. So it's certainly all around us.
Other people? I know that in the landscape department, climate has been quite a big part of the curriculum. How have you encountered that, Muha?
Oh, definitely is something that we are always looking to. All the professors are very engaged with this topic. Also, there's the interest to consider the social part of like the climate, which is being very interesting, like climate justice and start to scratch this idea that how it's not just a general like issue, but there's different scales of impact that we should also address. And this, I'm feeling that, as I say, I'm just in the second semester right now, but I think the studio also addressing part of this. It's open to considering a broad aspect of like climate justice. And of course, each student will have we have a very diverse background as well with the students, and each student will pursue their own interest in this topic, but everyone is addressing in some way.
Could I just add
Yeah.
one thing, which is I wanted to tack onto Whytne's comment about the sort of non-canonical ways of thinking about design, and I think that's certainly related to climate change. So I have also seen recently, and certainly I've been learning a lot about sort of traditional forms of knowledge of the way we've coexisted in the world for many years prior to the past, say, 200 years where we've done a lot of the damage. So I do think that we've been paying closer attention than we had been. We still need to pay even closer attention to these sorts of things, but I think it has been an exciting time at the school to begin to have these conversations. And it's a much needed conversation, of course.
And anyone else on the climate issue?
I would just add to what has been said from the perspective of the planning discipline. I think we, in even our first semester of Core Studio, have talked a lot about the role of the planner and other designers in facilitating dialogue. So I think dialogue around climate change is going to get increasingly more emotional, more controversial. And so how can we facilitate conversations around senses of place, senses of home, and what it might be like to kind of co-create what a more climate resilient future would look like.
I'll reply to both of those last two comments, because I think, I think part of what you're saying, Isaac, is that there is, the topic permeates the curriculum in ways that you don't always, it's not always foregrounded, but it's there, and I think is becoming, and it's what I hope, that it becomes a sort of consciousness within most of our classes, frankly, because it's applicable in almost everything. And I appreciate your bringing up the idea of thinking of, okay, the history of how people lived in this world, on this earth, before industrialization, where we started doing real damage. Are there ways that we can reach back and think about that? And that isn't necessarily foregrounded as a climate concern, but it actually feeds into that. And I think that the other issue which you bring up, Livesey, is sort of the emotions around this, the anxiety, frankly, about the fact that our planet is in danger. And that actually relates to one of the questions from our audience, which is, how do you manage stress? And when you are stressed, what do you do to relax? So this group knows that I believe in trying to manage your stress and work-life balance. And that's hard here, given all the, I mean, it's like your kids in a candy shop. I mean, there's so many things going on here, so many things you can go hear, go do, so many interesting people to talk to. How do you manage the stress, or how do you manage to keep from spreading yourselves too thin? Or do you?
So this has been a question that's on my mind this semester because I'm doing a lot.
I noticed from your resume.
Yeah. I think for me, something I do for myself is, like, on most days when I can, like, I take a nap. Like, I've told people, yeah, I'll do this after I take a nap, or I'm about to take a nap. I'll talk to you in an hour. Either on campus or, like, depending on how my class schedule is, I can go home and, like, take a nap and come back. And that really helps me. I just find naps to be, like, a great way to, like, reset my mind. Like, when I'm stressed or, like, feeling upset about something, it's just a great reset. And then also too, I think, like, just socializing with people has been very, like, beneficial for me. I think especially, last year when we were in the throes of, isolation because of the pandemic, I realized just, like, how important it was to have, like, social interaction. I think at first, I was like, hey, why is this important? Like, it's kind of frivolous. but realizing like those social interactions really do impact your well-being. So I enjoy like going to like bother my classmates in the trays, like just annoy them for like 30 minutes. Like, what are you doing? Or, asking people, what are we doing after beer and dogs? Like, what are we doing this weekend? But really like being intentional about like my socializing as well has been a way for me to kind of like not be like super stressed at the school.
Others, how do you deal with stress, Muha?
Yeah, one thing that I want to say that MUPs are my place to go. They are. But when I'm too stressed, my tray, I go to the MUPs and stay for a little bit and go back.
I never knew that our urban planning students played that role in the school.
But I think in my case, I did a great change from first semester. First semester I was very overwhelming with work and stay here in Ghana for long periods of time. I'm still doing, but now I'm like using some Harvard resources, like I'm going to the gym and try when I have like to eat something lunch, I try to go to Harvard Square. That's a little bit longer, but just the walk, it's sometimes to keep the ideas fresh and give some space from Ghana as well, and then be able to go back to work and design and studies. I'm trying to balance a little bit and also as Garrett said last semester that I need to block sometimes, and I'm really trying, even thinking that I can. I will block this time, like this hour, kind of my nap without nap time.
You're napping while being awake.
Just be out of it.
Nice. Other strategies that people have?
One thing I decided to do is to move to Boston instead of staying in Cambridge, which I'm not sure if it's a good idea yet, but
now that it snowed.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to like spend at least half an hour to come here every morning. But it's a way for me to get some distance from the GSD and like force myself to go to the city basically and cross the river and clear my mind. I would agree with the socializing part, even if I don't have a desk here at GAN because I'm an MD student, and as you know, MD students doesn't have desks here, but we have the rooms, but it's not the same. But I'm fortunate enough to have friends with desks, so I also come and bother them every day. Actually, they offered me like a second chair in the desks, and we stay there with our masks and everything. So it's very helpful for me to feel that I'm part of a study group or something, and I'm not isolated and alone in my space working on my things. And the other thing I recently realized that's happening in Boston is the music scene. So I started going to concerts, and this is very helpful as well.
That's great. Others? Livesey, Isaac?
I can completely agree with just like finding reprieve and in spending time with my classmates. And, there are times in which we all have the same deadline, but just even taking a moment to like kind of laugh at the absurdity of like, maybe we're not going to put together this board in the time that we have, and it will be what it will be, and kind of just recognizing that and yeah, enjoying each other's company in the process. And then I think the other thing that I really enjoy doing is just taking time to cook and like really kind of get into making a recipe and knowing at the end that I'm feeding myself, and I always feel better after I eat. I'm sure we've all experienced the reality of hunger. So
yeah, I was also going to say that I think all of my best ideas happen when I'm either running, showering, or standing behind a skillet. I think those are the three ways for me that, and you just take time, but of course these things percolate while you take time away, and it's not lost time, it's time well spent.
It's so important, and I would second that. Both I am trying running. It's not speaking to me. I'm not getting that runner's high, but I do yoga every morning, and I give my shout out, as I do very frequently, to the Down Dog app, which is now free for all EDU holders And so I recommend it. But that and cooking for me, and again, you're right that it's time where you're thinking about different things, maybe listening to a podcast, but you're also thinking about your work. And it's very helpful to make sure that you have this time that sort of stuff percolates. I also walk to school and home and need that distance to sort of decompress, transition, and get a little exercise. We do have a suggestion from Brianna Robinson, who says, advice for students, and I think also for the dean, never apologize for taking the time you need to feel like yourself. And you can't do your best if you're not at your best. Take your time, sleep, and drink your water. So, and I would say add to that, eat well, eat carefully. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. Also, a question from Carlos Bueno, who did a shout out, I think, to Muha. Carlos, I don't know if you're also from Brazil. So to students, how do you connect with your current interests and hobbies? How do you connect your current interests and hobbies with the GSD life apart from classes and academic groups? And we've talked about that a little bit with some of the social groups that you're involved with, but maybe you could elaborate with a couple examples of some of your non-academic work. How are you connecting your GSD interest with some of those non-academic pursuits here? Beer and dogs? Remy the cat?
Yeah, first that I think even we being here for so many times, like so for like till sometimes late night, it's the same people that we are working together is basically the same people that we want to like go to the bar, have a drink, or like just walk to the squares and like be outside, hang like socialize in general. So in my opinion, the experience of working here in Uganda is very enjoyable because of the students, because of our friends, colleagues that are getting this sense of work a little bit like lighter. And in this social process as well, you'll find people that have some very similar interests, and this will help to navigate through the school. And in my case, personally, I also am an artist, so I paint. Sometimes I find space between work to dedicate to this, and then this is my relief moment, and depends on what kind of like social activities you like. You'll find someone that can in Gand or in Harvard in general. There's other groups as well that do some kind of like hiking and other sports, right? Like running. I can run in this weather. It's too cold for me, but I love to run, and I'm looking forward to a better weather too.
I think we may actually have to stop at that answer, which was a great answer, and turn back to Peggy, who wants to take command again of the event.
Thanks, Sarah. So thank you all. That was really a lively discussion. So Muha, Areti, Isaac, Livesey, and Whytne, we really appreciate you being involved. And I think it's fabulous for our alumni to see themselves in you as, you know, as fresh and current students. So we really appreciate that. As we wrap up, we wanted to ask each of you one last question, and we'd invite everyone online to please chat in on this too. The question is, what is the future of design? What is the future of design? So I'm going to give you like a few seconds on that, and then anyone who has their answer ready can just jump in, but please jump in online. Please join us on this.
Okay, I can start. I think, in my opinion, the future of design can be neutral, political neutral. I think for too long, the idea that we can produce this neutrality, maybe it's blocking space for more a diverse approach or adding more to the canon. Go back again to the Whytne answer. So I think this, for me, is the future of design that takes stand and then add to this, not just imagine that is embracing all the diversity or all the possibilities in design.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I would add that for me, the future of design is to be situated and proactive. It's nice to recognize a problem, complain about that and all these things, but we should do something. And when I say proactive, it's not necessarily proposing a design solution, but it can also be a new way, a new perspective of seeing a problem, or a provocative vision, or a film, or different ways of dissemination of research, which I'm very much looking forward to see at the GSD and in general as a future of design.
For me, the future of design, I would say vernacular. So things that, not like the super like stylized or like how you produce, renderings or, urban plans that we do, but the things that people who like aren't directly in this profession, in these fields, the things that they are doing every day to like make their living conditions easier, or like just to manage the ways in which they live and move through the world.
Isaac.
I think the future of design is a network of decentralized interventions. I think that there's still room for singular moments of design, but we need to be thinking of design as sort of an accumulation of efforts that is connected to one another.
Nice.
And I would, just to build on that, I would say the future of design is collectivism, thinking about how design can engender social trust, engender relationship building, and kind of build the sense that we are all in this together, and the challenges that we face can only be solved by all of us coming together to solve them.
Wow. So all of those answers I think are really terrific. And I'm going to be incredibly sappy and say that the future of design is you all, which is, I mean, it is part of what makes me very excited in my role, because I essentially get to traffic in the future constantly, because I'm seeing new generations come through, and I anticipate what you're going to do. But I mean, all of your answers to this question and all of the questions makes me very optimistic about the future. Might be my answer. I'm optimistic about the future, and the future is here.
And I would add to that, that the future is not only you all, but the way that you connect with our alumni. So we really appreciate the fact that we have built an amazing GSD community and family, and community is an important word for Sarah and for all of us here. So we want to just take a moment to thank you for being part of our community and let you know how much it means to us. I'd like to also take a minute to thank the team, the behind the scenes team here. So Matt, thank you. Lindsay, Pam, Taniqua, cameraman, I don't know your name. Manuel, thank you, Manuel. And then also thanks to our special guest from Student Services, to Janice and to Melissa. You'll be hearing more from Melissa on ways to engage alumni very shortly. So we've got a lot of exciting plans, and we want to think, as I said with you, we want to be really sure that there's more ways for you to feel part of the GSD community. So with that, thanks for being part of today. Thanks again to our student panel. And of course, thank you, Dean Whytne. Super.